Thanks, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic Rethink Retail webinar sponsored by TSC. Today, we are going to be talking about how to avoid retail tech mistakes, choosing the right barcode and RFID solutions. This is actually the second webinar in this series. The first one was called Smart Retail Starts Here. But if you didn't get a chance to see that one, don't worry. We're going to give you a brief recap, so you don't need to go back and watch it. But feel free to go back and watch it because there's a lot of great content in there. If you want more background on Auto ID, which includes barcodes and RFID, stick around and we're going to talk more about it. My name is Jonathan Aitken. I've been working in the auto ID industry for over 10 years, beginning as Director of RFID and Retail IT at Lululemon Athletica, and then with Avery Dennison's RFID team, and now at PVH Corp as a Vice President of Global On-Product Technology. On-Product Technology is all the technology that's attached to our products, including RFID, 2D barcodes, as well as 1D barcodes. I'm a Rethink Retail top retail expert, nominated in 2024 and 2025. I'm also the past chair of the RAIN RFID Board of Directors, which is the RFID industry group. In this webinar, you're going to learn how to sidestep common pitfalls and match the right barcoding and RFID solutions to each process to drive efficiency, accuracy, and measurable business impact. Whether launching your first RFID pilot or optimizing your existing workflows, this session is going to offer actionable guidance to make confident, business-driven technology choices. I'm excited to have a great group of panelists here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves quickly. And some of them I've known for years, and some of them I've just met. So we're going to be starting with my friend and fellow Stanford alumni, Chris Brown. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Brown. I'm the RFID Program Director at TSC. TSC is one of the world's leading manufacturers of the hardware and supplies that get used in barcode and RFID solutions, including for the retail industry.
Juan.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Juan Madrigal. I've been working at Bluebird for the past 3 years as a technical project manager, and currently I specialize in enterprise mobile solutions and RFID, while I lead projects across the Americas and Europe while providing technical support and also overseeing overall project execution. Thank you for having me here.
It's nice to meet you now, Juan. Clint.
Hello, my name is Clint Ridenour. I'm the Technical Service Director here at Teamwork Commerce. So Teamwork Commerce is a point of sale, inventory management, and order management solution. As a technical director, I oversee the delivery of our solution with clients and ensure their technical architecture and operational workflows meet their business needs, which includes RFID in those business needs.
Excellent. It's so nice to meet you. I've known of Teamwork Commerce for a while, but we haven't met, so it's great. And then last but not least, somebody I've known for a long time, JW Franz. JW.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks to be here with everybody. Good to see you again. And yes, I'm JW Franz, Director of Innovation at TRG. For those of you who aren't familiar, we're a privately held global managed services provider across several continents. And my role with the company is I lead our go-to-market strategy for automation, which heavily focuses on RFID, where we basically lead with best of both breeds, OEMs and ISVs, to deliver turnkey solutions, leveraging our services to our enterprise and retail customers.
So exciting. And you know, I see you have your RAIN RFID badge on. I actually have my top retail badge, but I should have put it on. So next time we'll coordinate for the next webinar.
Got you covered.
I have a bunch of RAIN ones as well. So let's talk about the first webinar a little bit. And Chris, maybe you can give us a bit of a recap because we were both on that. And that was the webinar where we talked about, smart retail starts here. So what were some of the main kind of challenges and opportunities that we highlighted in that webinar regarding item level tracking, barcodes, and RFID?
Okay, I would say that the main challenge that we all agreed on was getting the correct data into these new 2D barcodes and RFID tags. Retailers have been working for decades with their UPC and EAN barcodes. It's all been fairly simple, but when you transition to 2D barcodes and RFID, getting the right data in there and formatting it correctly is quite a challenge. So that was the major challenge we all agreed on. And then on the opportunity side, you mentioned this item level data. Everybody needs to understand that once you shift to item level identification and data about each and every item, that changes everything. Suddenly you get highly accurate inventory. You can optimize your inventory. You'll get a sales uplift. Jonathan, we were talking about this the other day. I think a standard figure is 5 to 15% uplift in sales when your inventory is accurate. You reduce costs overall and you reduce errors. So the big opportunity is all of the little opportunities that stem from item level data.
Yeah, 100%. In the retail stores, when I go and I talk to people, they love it. Obviously, there's challenges potentially getting it up and running, and there's that learning curve. But now, if you try to take that away from them, they'd be pretty upset because
Right.
they're now relying upon this to help them manage what in the past was very complex to manage. So that's great. So let's just kind of talk about frame up the problem a little bit. Why should you be choosing the right barcode and RFID technology solution, and what does it matter who you choose? So again, maybe we'll start with Chris and then move over to some of the others.
Okay, well, when you're looking at transitioning over to one of these new technologies, the first thing I would look at is what infrastructure do you have in place right now?
Right.
And most retailers will have the infrastructure in place to handle 2D barcodes. They may not know that, but most of the hardware out there will automatically handle the new 2D barcodes. So that is a consideration. I know I'm promoting barcodes and not RFID there, but keep it in mind. It is something to consider.
They're tightly connected for sure. And obviously the 2D barcode, there's just a minor tweak to your barcode reader, but like you said, most of today's barcode readers can read a 2D barcode and pull the serial number off of that, which is there's a whole tight connection between that and RFID because the serial numbers are the same typically if you follow the GS1 standard.
And then I think the next thing that you should consider is this transition to item level data. Now, if you're working with RFID, RFID will automatically force a transition to item level data. 2D barcodes support item level data as well, but it's not necessary. So you need to understand that you're going to need to update your systems, your software to support and leverage item level RFID and item level data, And then finally, the transition to item level data is complex. So you need to make sure that you're looking at partners who understand this and can support that transition over to item level.
It's very true. You talk to some point of sale providers and oh, well, we interface with RFID. And it's no, you need
Right.
to speak RFID, right?
Yep.
So Clint, talking about a provider who speaks RFID really well, what are your experiences with this?
Yeah, so some considerations when you're choosing a solution, right? Prior to that, you really need to look at what problems you are trying to solve for your business. RFID and these technologies are awesome. They can solve a plethora of different things. So really identifying those problems. I'm often in the industry seeing two primary levels of optimization. One is labor optimization, and the second being stock optimization. So labor optimization, meaning getting your employees off tasks that are mundane and things that they're doing over and over, such as checking a customer out, checking inventory in, doing stock counts, and actually putting that labor back on the floor and interacting with your customers to really drive sales.
Yeah.
The second being stock levels, right? If your stock levels are accurate and you're doing things that are very consistent with omnichannel, such as buy online, pick up in store, those stock levels are really, really important for your customer experience. So thinking about, I think in the last conversation that you guys had, you talked about someone walking into a store and not that inventory not being connected to online. That's very, very frustrating for a customer. So having those inventory numbers accurate are great. Some other things you can solve are, shrink reduction, elimination of manual errors, sales data visibility, warranty and return tracking, just really getting the points that you want to solve with this technology.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, but a lot of that takes interaction with the POS and making sure that your POS partner is the right one. So, and speaking of omnichannel, where I work, we actually just launched omnichannel using RFID data, and the emails are flying around. People are so excited about it, and you're starting to see these sales orders come in and pick to units that were previously invisible to e-com. So it's definitely a huge sales boost right there as well. So JW, it's great to see you again too. I know you recently joined TRG, but you come to TRG with years and years of RFID experience, and we've worked together actually on different projects before. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I guess I'd come into it with a different perspective. Like the audience has covered some great topics already, and for myself, I want to pick up where we left off on the previous sessions. So for those that got to listen into episode 1, there was a comment from Dean Frew, but that he made about retail success moving forward, and one of the things was selecting quality vendors. And from TRG's perspective, I say that is very much true. As it's very keen. It's a major part of our go-to-market strategy, which is, like I said before, dependent on partnering with OEMs and ISVs to deliver a turnkey solution to customers. So that I think is number one. Is there's a lot of vendors out there, but making sure that you've done the proper assessment and evaluation of those, and then from there, really have a holistic view of the solution, because solution can mean a lot of different things to different people. But from my lens, that encompasses hardware, software, services, not just on the implementation, but on the delivery and the support. Post-delivery support. And then as a part of that, really looking at the needs near term and long term, because obviously, we want to crawl, walk, run, as we all say. We don't want to boil the ocean all at the same time, but really understand that what you're going to do today is going to grow and scale based on maturity, as others have shown proven success. So working with partner ecosystem that can support that evolution and that maturity, that ties into things related to store automation, like we're talking about. And then the last thing I would say is really don't let cost be the main justifier or decision maker for what vendor or solution provider you work with, because inevitably, if when you go the lower cost option, you ultimately might pay for it more in the end. I know from my past experience, and I think Jonathan, you can probably relate in some ways. We've seen some brands in their wholesale business and their DC operation have gone with certain vendors and technology solutions because they were cheap. But ultimately, what happened was they found out that it underperformed in their environment over the course of time. And now they're actually coming back and bringing in third-party consultants to kind of help them reassess how that technology, that solution is viable in their day-to-day operation, and hopefully make changes that they can leverage it without having to rip it out, put something else in its place.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are a lot of, I wouldn't say cheap, but low cost tunnel solutions, and there's some higher cost ones, but you have to understand the differences of how those work. So, and I also agree on the crawl, walk, run. I mean, I've talked to so many executives who say, "Oh, well, we just need one RFID software for supply chain," and I was like, that does not exist. So, if what you're looking for, you're going to have to build it, but what you need for a retail store is completely different. What you need for a distribution center is completely different. What you need for a factory, and then if you have other use cases in between. And then integration with your point of sale, like some of the things that Clint was talking about. Even within a retail store, you might even have 2 or 3 systems that are all talking RFID. You might have an inventory system and a point of sale, and potentially like a fraud return checking system. So it can be fairly complex, but like you said, crawl, walk, run. Get the value, start tagging, and start moving forward. So Juan, let's go over to you. Like, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, well, just to complement a bit what JW said, technology continues to evolve, and modular and software upgradable devices will be essential for operation. These technologies will allow businesses to adapt quickly to new standards or innovations without having to replace the whole infrastructure. So, for example, even if I go and choose, barcodes, right now we're seeing that there's some sort of converge between the 2D barcodes and RFID technology. And what we want to make sure is that our final goal is technology that we invest today, it can be adapted to tomorrow's need without the need to start all over again. So I wanted to add that to what my colleagues just mentioned. And that's exactly what partners like TRG, Teamwork Commerce are really excelling at, which is helping customers to plan and integrate these technologies in a way that they can scale and they can be ready for the future trends that are in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, GS1 is pushing, or not pushing, but has come up with a standard, which is the GS1 Digital Link, which is a 2D barcode, but it's a QR code in particular. I mean, there's other versions as well, but the QR is the most common, and it has the UPC or the EAN, which people call the GTIN in the business, and then but it also has the serial number, so you can extract the SGTIN, which is the same code that's on the RFID tag from the 2D code. But obviously, you have to make sure that whoever's making your labels does both of those things simultaneously and make sure that both are actually updated and correct. So I've seen cases where barcodes are printed and the RFID is blank. That's obviously a terrible outcome. Mismatched RFID, two RFIDs, like I've seen it all, right? And I'm sure you guys have as well. So, but 100% understanding, understanding what's really important out there. And then obviously I've seen the same RFID with the same serial number, which is devastating as well. So all these things like Chris was saying, you have to understand, how to make it work. Because if you have the same serial number for the same item, the RFID system is going to think there's one when you have 2 or 3 or 10 or 50. So, and that's kind of defeating the whole purpose of the rapid counting of RFID. So let's talk about frontline experiences a little bit more. Like, what factors make a difference between a successful auto ID deployment and one that underdelivers? So maybe we'll go to Clint.
Yeah, for sure. I kind of like the analogy JW said earlier about trying to boil the entire ocean at one time. And I think that's kind of goes to my point of try deploying it in a pilot location and one location instead of a full company-wide rollout. Like, for example, for us, we have a sports team that's in a stadium. They rolled out only in a team store first before going to all the other ones. And they work through those issues and workflows with a single location rather than a large rollout, like causing massive issues. So they got to work all these out. RFID is such a physical technology. It's not just like software saying, A plus B equals C. It's affected by really the environment. Metals, water bottles, fixtures, even the product itself can distort the RFID experience. So making sure that you have an expert in the field who's knowledgeable and understands how to avoid issues such as that. Surprisingly, we found out a hockey puck is a, absorber of RFID metals, and who would have thought it? Like, or RFID signals.
That's actually really interesting. So where I worked before, we had metal water bottles similar to this one, and it was a new thing for the holidays, and the team ordered a nice band to go around it, but the band was really tight around it, and then nobody could read the RFID tag. So then it was extra work for the stores to actually have to like slide the cardboard band up so there was some air gap, and then they could take the inventory. And so that's not ideal. That's extra work. But that's just an example of how, someone on the ticketing team doesn't understand how RFID works, and then the implication of that. So like, also growing experts within your own organization about the impacts of things like, what does it mean for metal? What does it mean for water or liquids? Is huge, right? But all these things are now, the technology has evolved so much that, in the past, you would hear people say, oh, you can't do it with liquids and metals. So that's totally not true anymore. I've seen some really cool stuff with liquids and metal. So you just have to understand literally like a small amount of physics, and then it can work. So JW, talking about physics, talk to me about a managed service provider. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen from your experience?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Jonathan. And coming back to where I left off before, and even like I said before that, where Dean took us and left off in the first episode, is you have this ecosystem across the industry of partners. I think I recall at a industry event earlier this year that I heard one of the speakers say that on average, when deploying any given RFID solution, you have roughly between 5 and 7 providers that are delivering the final solution to the customer. So when I look at it, from a managed services provider, it's partnering with those providers, of course, that have proven success together. I'm not saying you're gonna have that every single time, but knowing that there's good working relationships, so that way you're kind of delivering that seamless experience to the customers, so they have that belief and that understanding that that this ecosystem is really working kind of harmoniously together to deliver a solution that meets their needs. And then beyond that, really, as you look at the different roles across the organizations, across those providers, clearly documenting kind of like each role, swim lane, and kind of managing that as its own project. So that way everyone's held accountable, and we're all kind of marching forward to in the same direction. And then beyond that, when you really start to define the needs of the customer and have a clear understanding of the challenges, the goals, and the objectives, clear documentation around that with workflows that kind of shows, describes, illustrates how that solution, along with all of its capabilities, as well as environmental process dependencies, are going to impact that to deliver the the ROI that one would expect. And then I know that we're probably going to talk about it here, a few more times. But to validate the success of a solution or its capabilities, a pilot. And I know pilot is very common in this industry, and use that pilot, take those lessons learned, take the good, the bad, and the otherwise, and take that and apply it to the rollout. Expect to have challenges in a pilot. Don't expect it to be seamless. And just remember that for any of these solutions, whether we're talking about barcode, RFID, or just AIDC in general, these projects are not necessarily about the technology so much. It's more about the people and the process. So that term that we all use, PPT, people, process, technology, I think very much holds true here as well.
100%. I mean, you don't need to do a proof of concept on RFID because the proof works, but a pilot is important for getting your documentation, those lessons learned, and also like what change has to happen within that organization, right? Like you no longer have to have people with walkie-talkies restocking because a person in the back just knows what needs to come to the front, right? Because your replenishment algorithms will do that for you. So those things are huge, right? And that's actually where some of the labor savings comes in as well. But it's a process change, and people need time to adapt. So Juan, I know I want to come to you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about some of your experience with deployments and projects.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, in my experience, the user adoption makes an important difference in AIDC deployments. Usually, retailers and partners, they need to remember that the most valuable asset is the people, the store staff, or the people are going to be using the new solutions every day. And all the solution is excellent. It has to be communicated well through all the levels of the organization. Because I've seen cases where the staff find the solutions from like a partner, for example, quite overwhelming and complex. So that makes hard for them to adjust to it and prefer to go back to the old ways. And this limits the solutions impact that we have in our processes. So to truly maximize the return of investment, implementation has to be intuitive, and also we have to give proper training for people. And we have to make somehow that the users trust the solution or what we are trying to implement. So when the staff understands and believes in the process or what we are trying to do, it will naturally translate into a better performance and better user experience in the process that we're trying to improve.
One of the things that's really interesting in the retail organization, it's where I work now, we have come across multiple times in our rollouts where we're actually seeing people who've used RFID at previous retailers that they've worked at. So it's no longer like a science project or a new technology. It's sort of like table stakes. And it's like, oh yeah, we did this at H&M, or we did this at Superdry, or we did this at Lululemon. Like so many brands, Adidas, Nike, Puma, Under Armour, like it's like every major brand is doing it in the retail world, right? And so you're starting to see this sort of second or third generation. And I often hear great things from people at the store, like, hey, when are we getting this feature? So it's cool. So talking about like the real world and real cases, Chris, like, I call the three parts of the RFID system like the three-legged stool of RFID. You need RFID tags, you need some software, you need some hardware. And then JW talked about sometimes there's 5 or 6 or 7 vendors because you include POS, you include mobile device management. I mean, it can go on and on. It can be fairly complex. And so, how can things go wrong? And what makes RFID different than barcodes? But also what makes it similar?
Okay. Well, things can go wrong in many places with an RFID installation. Now, I'm not putting RFID down. That's not my point. I am highlighting the importance of working with a good partner that is capable and competent in RFID. JW talked a lot about the ecosystem concept and how there are on average 5 to 7 suppliers involved in an RFID solution. So as long as you pick a capable, competent partner, they can guide you through the many potential tripping points. You mentioned your three-legged stool. By the way, I would update that stool from the one leg from tag to tagged item. Figuring out the tag as it will go onto the tagged item is a common tripping point for RFID installations. So you need to make sure your partner understands the process of tag selection as the tag applies to the actual item. Another common tripping point, which we talked about before, is the correct data encoded to your RFID tags. So make sure that your partner understands the GS1 encoding schemes that get used in retail. Make sure they know how to actually construct those encodings correctly. Then you have the reader placement. Actually, it's really the antenna placement for your reading solution. And then the software component, which is one of your other, so the readers and I should also mention the encoding devices. So normally it's an RFID enabled printer. That's your hardware leg of the stool. And then the third leg of the stool is the software. You and the partner really need to understand that when you transition to RFID, when we are switching usually from SKU level, meaning the UPC or EAN number, over to item level, and that changes everything. So the software needs to be able to digest that deluge of item level data and pass that data to your host system in a meaningful way.
Yep, 100%.
So how is RFID different from barcoding? Well, this is a quick recap for everybody who's not that familiar with it. First up, it allows bulk reading of the identifiers, of the tags. So with a barcode system, it's a one-to-one transaction. One reader reads one tag at a time. With RFID, you can push that button and read hundreds of tags in 1 second. RFID does not require a line of sight. RFID, I mentioned this earlier, does force you to transition to item level identification. RFID generally has a longer read range. These days, it's pretty comfortable to say a good 5 to 10 meter read range, whereas with a barcode system, you're around that 1 meter read range. Another difference that I like that people don't talk about that much is we haven't really put it into RFID solutions much yet in the retail industry, but I think it's going to be big. And that is RFID allows for easier and more robust security item identifiers. So let's say I have my Gucci handbag. That's a high value item.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that the identifier associated with that item verifies that it is an authentic item. So secure identifiers. I think that's coming. And finally, RFID definitely reduces the number of errors that are involved with the staff. With a barcode solution, it's easy to miss a barcode read when you're taking inventory. It's equally easy to double scan an item accidentally.
I've done that at the grocery store so many times.
Okay, yeah, right.
Over.
Everybody who's used the barcode self-checkout, did I scan that or did I scan that twice? I don't know. Okay. They're very similar and they're complementary. Don't think that RFID is going to displace barcodes. They will both be around. They really work together. They both encode an identifier. They can both go item level now. You have your existing retail systems for barcodes, and now we're just layering RFID on top of that.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the industry too. Like the tagging for retail, like apparel and footwear, has been solved by the really large label companies. But things like beauty products, it's still a whole new area because of the complexity with the liquids, but also the high speed. And so instead of putting a label on, they're doing blank labels and high speed encoding. And so that's like a completely different process. So it very much depends on the industry that you're in. And
yes,
one thing is like Walmart in particular is pushing the boundaries of RFID in a good way to expand the industry and get more and more categories of products on board, which is requiring more and more innovation. So it's really pretty interesting. And I could relate. I triple scanned a barcode the other day at Whole Foods, and I had to call the guy over. And I was like, I know what I'm doing. Literally, I'm an expert in this. Thanks, Chris. And I totally agree about the complexities of RFID, and certainly there's a need for piloting here. And like I said earlier, it's no longer a science experiment or a proof of concept. We're really in the place where the pilots are validating your documentation, making sure that your hardware configuration works, your firewall rules are updated. You certainly don't want to go from just opening the box to rolling out full fleet, but fairly quickly with experienced partners, this should be a repeatable process that you can do into every single location. So it shouldn't be a configuration in every single one. But
Yeah.
Juan, I mean, tell me some of the things that you thought or have seen in your experience at Bluebird.
Yeah. Well, I personally think that pilot tests are essential for scalability. For example, right now I'm currently working with a customer that has around more than 1,000 stores across the world, and also they have over 300,000 devices from Bluebird deployed in their stores. And we actually need to deploy one solution across all the world to add this new functionality. And well, we are actually planning the pilot at this moment. And while discussing with this customer, I'm like, hey, like, I really hope the pilot test goes well next week. And he's like, hey, no, like, we would like that to find as many issues as we can during the pilot process so that we can prepare and fix before going global. And actually, yeah, it's true. The pilot
It's an
test.
interesting concept, right? Like he knows that you could have a challenge. Obviously, you're trying to be as confident as possible, but he's willing to take those hits now to make it smooth later, right?
Correct. Yeah. And well, like pilot tests are essential for scalability. They will allow both the partner and retailers to collaborate, define the goals, and also identify what needs to be improved before expanding to the whole nation or maybe in different regions. And well, the main objective is to reduce this risk when scaling up. Issues will appear. There's no perfect pilot. I've never seen one, at least. So, and also it depends a lot on the different environments. For example, especially for RFID, although we have different, for example, in Morocco, we have one type of, how to say, regulations for RFID. In Europe, we have different, America. So all these considerations might affect, but still during the pilot, what we want is to reduce those risks and try to fix any problem that might arise early and ensure the solution can be solid before we go worldwide. So it's a stage that we cannot skip. We have to pilot, yes or yes, and also even if during the pilot we find any issues, it should not discourage the customer or the retailer. It's a good experience, and it's something that will help us learn things that we were not considering, again, like before we go global.
I completely agree. I mean, again, pilots are super critical. I was just in a conversation last night about Australia and New Zealand, and they're like, "Well, just so you know, the frequency is different in New Zealand than it is in Australia, so we need different equipment and we have different configurations." So it's like, okay. And our team in Australia was like, "I didn't know that," and I was like, "Well, I knew that because I've seen this before, presentations at the RAIN RFID Industry Conference, things like that." And so, yes, I agree. There's a lot of complexity that goes into it, especially around the frequencies. The nice thing, a lot of that's managed at the software level now. They can do software-defined radios, so it's easier, but you still have to be aware of it for legal reasons. Chris, I'm going to go back to you again. One thing is like we've actually been tagging for our Asia stores since January, and so that's going to make our go live process much simpler because we don't have to do the dreaded tag up party, which if anybody's done the tag up party, they know it's actually not really a party, but it's something you have to do to try to get as many products in your store have RFID tags as possible to really be able to take advantage of it as you start moving forward. But one of the things I had for you, Chris, was just sort of like, are there some considerations that we haven't really talked about yet, but you might want to consider?
Yes. So if I were an end user and I were considering RFID, I would interview various potential solution partners, and I would probably be a little devious and have some pre-made questions with answers that I knew the answers to. And I would pose these to the partners to
Chris
make
can
sure.
help you with those questions if you want to talk about that.
For example, what will be encoded to the RFID tags? That's a key consideration. Make sure that the partner can give you a clear, coherent, for retail, it should be GS1 based answer to that question. So I would definitely interview potential partners, dig into their ecosystem. JW talked a lot about the ecosystem, which is critical because there are always multiple suppliers involved in a
Yes.
project.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider is, Clint might have spoken about this earlier. Don't start with the concept that, hey, I want RFID. No, start with your business problems. I would stack rank those. And when you're talking to the partner, discuss how RFID and or 2D barcodes can really address those business problems and solve those problems for you. And finally, I would make sure that any partner you're going to work with really has a roadmap, a step-by-step plan for implementing an RFID solution. It should not be hodgepodge. We've been talking about the pilots. That should be a necessary step.
Yeah.
I like to refer to the pilots now as necessary refinement as opposed to the science.
That's a good way of doing it. Is literally when I was at Lululemon, we refined the document to roll out to stores 25 times. Like
Right.
it just
Okay.
like until we got it right. And we incorporated like lessons learned as the technicians reported back with problems. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, the technology works. You just need to refine it on a case-by-case basis.
Well, it's the human factor, right? And when you're scaling at large volumes, you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds, of humans involved, all of which might have slightly different. So your documentation has to be super solid. And then you got different languages, potentially if you're going around the world. So 100%. In New York, where I'm based, we had different unions. So one union would come and hang the device on the wall, and then the other one would come in and plug in the power because they're different unions. So like all these things, you have to understand how that works, and having a good
That's a
partner.
new one for me. That's a new one for me. Okay, I haven't
It's
heard
like that in California as well. It's not
Okay.
just. But yeah, so like those are certain challenges that you need to think through of like it's installing equipment into your locations, right? And the good thing is like your teams will know this, but hopefully, but working through that. So JW, I know we were talking a little bit about GS1 standards. Is there something in that you want to talk about? I know you were kind of referring earlier before we got started about Jonathan Gregory, who's another good friend of ours from GS1. He's a friend of the pod, I think we could say. So maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and you kind of stole my thunder, but thanks there, Jonathan. We're friends, so I understand. But no, I appreciate
I'll
having
Venmo you later. Sorry.
I appreciate having resources like GS1 and Jonathan Gregory and all of us that work together in these in the space. And I think it's just recognizing that when we deploy these solutions globally, right, to do it at scale and to do it most effectively and efficiently, it all comes down to standardized data carriers and encoding structures, like I know Chris has talked about, and then also understanding that these these data carriers, as they've grown and evolved over time, and I don't necessarily want to call it new because it's not necessarily new, but it's newer, being things like you mentioned, like GS1 Digital Link, and understanding how all these technologies really can kind of coexist in different ways, and it's not necessarily a one and done. And how those can really be utilized is, I think it's already been mentioned a few times now, from point of manufacturing through distribution and the store. And I can't ever be in a session like this without trying to use a quote from people like Jonathan, but I think he said it best, which is GS1 standards are a global business vocabulary which enable interoperability and business agility. And I use that time and time again in presentations just to help reinforce these points about how we can utilize standards for these global deployments. And then I guess the last thing I would say too is really avoid the shiny object syndrome, as I like to say. Obviously,
I think you stole that from me, by the way.
maybe
you guys are even.
But avoid that pitfall alone. And people today get hung up on, hey, I must use RFID for the sake of using RFID, or hey, I must use that overhead because it's the newest reader that just came out. Like, use it where it makes sense, right? And then it's the different technologies with the infrastructure that goes with it, and understand too that there's going to be times where it's RFID is just not the answer. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just going to be your good old fashioned barcode or something else in between. But when it is RFID, recognize that it is a journey. It's not a one and done investment, and it's going to continue to show you new use cases and value to your business.
Perfect. So JW, thanks. And while you did steal the shiny object thing from me, I actually think that there are some cases where the shiny object has like massive value. So some of those things that I say to people sometimes is, don't focus on self-checkout or don't focus on fitting room first. Get the basics done. But in some cases, there's some real value. And I know in particular that one of Clint's customers, they actually started the other way with self-checkout. And then because they saw some massive value in moving to self-checkout, particularly because of some of the features, like, somebody doesn't have to speak the same language as you because you're talking to a computer and it's got multiple languages. So Clint, maybe you can kind of touch on some of your experiences with self-checkout and the products that you guys have at Teamwork Commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen businesses really go into what their niche is and use this technology to support what they want their customer journey to be. And that can look very, very different between two different customers, right? So for, like you were saying, the stadium space, right? They went to self-checkout as their first part because they really needed to speed through lines, right? When you're in between innings and you're trying to get those customers in and out back to their seats, their fans are really there to watch a game and the retail is secondary. The faster you can get them through, the faster they can grow their sales. And we've seen sometimes even an upwards of like a 20% lift in that of sales.
Yeah,
On
I
the
believe it. I mean, I was at a football game and the line was like, before the game started, there's like 50 people in line and there's like 2 people selling. I'm like, come on. And I was like, where's the RFID for this? So yeah, 100%. Yeah. Nobody buys in the middle of the action. Everyone's buying at the same time, in between a quarter, in between innings, in between whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, also on the flip side of that, we have a European high-end retailer. They want to solve the inventory problem, right? They have very, very limited stock.
Correct.
So they use Bluebird devices to check in and out inventory. And they have a more elegant solution for self-checkout where it's associate-led. Not actually a
Mhm.
self-checkout, sorry. It's associate-led where they
Right.
have a pad underneath, and it just gives a more elegant customer experience of not having to scan each item in front of the customer and go through that whole process, right? They just add it to the pad, and then it rings up on the register. The Bluebird devices also help find those items that you only have one in stock, right? Because RFID emits a signal. So it's easy to walk through your store and say, hey, I only have one of these with a Bluebird gun, and go and find that item to help service your customer.
Yeah, when I was at Lululemon, there were these holiday mittens. They were so hot, and somebody had gone into the store and like wanted one, but didn't want to buy them or didn't want to commit. So they hid them under this pile of hoodies. And so there was literally one left in the store. And our CIO walked into the store and he's watching what's going on. And this customer comes up to the person and says, or to the sales associate and says, hey, do you have any more of these mittens? She goes, well, let me just check my RFID device. And the guy goes like, oh, this is cool. He's like listening. And she goes, yeah, we have one, but they should be here, but I don't know where this is. She goes, hang on. And she gets out the device, beep, 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 and pulls up the hoodies, finds the mittens. And the woman is like, this is incredible. And she's like, no, it's just RFID. So, so that's a great story, but I think it kind of ties into the value of what it can bring just beyond the barcode. So, and with that, I think we've got to the end of our time. So thank you guys so much for joining us today on LinkedIn Live and another great Rethink Retail webinar. Today's webinar was avoiding retail tech mistakes, choosing the right barcode and RFID solutions. And I want to thank all of the panelists from TSC Auto ID, from Bluebird, from Teamwork Commerce, Clint, and my friend JW. Thank you so much from TRG Solutions for your time and expertise today. So if you're ready to transform your business, TSC Auto ID would be excited to partner with you. So please contact Chris or Juan via email or LinkedIn to start a conversation. And you should see a slide up on the screen now with all the speakers' information. And feel free to reach out to any one of them if you want to talk in more detail. Thank you guys so much for attending. Have a great rest of your day. And until next time, thanks for joining us.